Hey, what's up? Welcome back to the No Tracers podcast. This show is all about urban exploring. We talk about abandoned places. We talk about rooftops, train hops, and everything in between. Any type of urban exploring is welcome here on this show. Welcome to the podcast. If you've been wondering what goes on behind the closed doors of abandoned places, if you want to know the stories of the people who explore the rot and decay, well, this is the podcast you've been looking for. I'd like to welcome you to No Tracers. So what's up, guys? Happy Friday. Welcome back to No Tracers. I am super excited to have Hysterical Panic on the podcast this week. If you are gearing up for a weekend of exploring, let me know down in the comments. Yes, on Spotify, they're bringing out a feature where you can actually comment on episodes now, which is so sick because they're trying to compete with YouTube because everyone is listening to podcasts on YouTube. And if you prefer to listen to this podcast on YouTube, go to youtube.com/NoTracersURBEX and you can watch the podcast there, or listen to the podcast rather, and look at the photos of my guest as the podcast plays. But yeah, now I don't know when they're rolling this out, but if it's already out, you can now comment on Spotify. So let me know what you're exploring or doing while listening to this episode of No Tracers. Very, very excited for that feature to get rolled out on Spotify personally as a podcast host and as a podcast listener. I can't wait to comment on podcasts that I enjoy listening to. So, like I said, this week, I have Hysterical Panic on the podcast to share his stories of his time urban exploring over the last 30 years. He's got some crazy stories, from urban exploring injury stories to crazy escapes and weird things he's experienced while exploring. Before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder for you guys, if you are new or if you have been listening for some time, I do have 2 photography books out. I have some cool shirts and hoodies and different merchandise items. If you want to get involved in the stuff I'm doing outside of the podcast, go to notracers.com and pick up one of my books or photo prints or whatever you like over there. And thank you for supporting the show. Thank you for supporting what I do. So the last thing I want to bring up real quick before we get into this episode is I was on Netflix last night trying to find something to watch, and there was like the coming soon section. There is a documentary coming out called Skywalkers. It's about it's a love story about 2 daredevil crane climbers. And I'm really excited to watch that. I love crane climbers. Like, I love watching their content. I've had a couple of them on the podcast. And so I'm super excited about this. They climb spires and cranes and all that kind of stuff. But I guess it's like how they fell in love with each other while climbing cranes. Or maybe they were already in love and then they were climbing cranes together. I don't really know. Skywalkers comes out on... When does it come out? It comes out on July 22nd, July 19th. So it comes out next week. Yeah, July 19th. Go check it out. Netflix. I'm not getting paid to promote this. I should be. But yeah, go check it out. It looks really cool. Hopefully it's good. I will follow up with you guys next week and talk about how dope it is or how not dope it is. But I'm sure it's probably pretty sick. But yeah, Skywalkers. Check it out. Netflix, July 19th. Without further ado, let's get into this episode. Hysterical Panic, welcome to the podcast. Please introduce yourself and how long you've been exploring to the No Tracers audience.
Hey, my name is Mike. I am at hysterical.panic on Instagram. And I've been exploring for 30 plus years, I think, which I know is a very large number, but I'm old, so.
So what got you into exploring in the first place? Like, what kind of was your first explorer? Like, take me into like the very beginning of your adventure as an explorer.
So I'm from New Jersey, which I think is important in this story. So I moved from an urban, like a city in New Jersey, to the suburbs when I was 12 or 13 years old. And, complete culture shock going from city to suburbs. But the first people that I met, one of those guys who's still one of my closest friends, who I actually still go out and explore with pretty frequently these days. He was the first person I met, and it was one of those young kid conversations. So what do you do for fun? And they're like, oh, we go exploring, like we go out into the woods, we go into abandoned houses. And that was literally what they did. And I think I was like, okay, that sounds fun. And then that just sort of, has spiraled over the last 30 years of checking things out.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think it always takes that like one initial, you know, person to be like, "Do you want to go do this?" And I think for avid explorers, I think the rest is kind of history, and so it's cool to like hear like where your journey began. Mine was kind of similar. I grew up in Oklahoma and explored the woods behind our neighborhood a lot,
Yep.
and stumbled across things here and there, and then it kind of just grew from there over the years, and traveled a lot and explored even more. But yeah, so what is it about abandoned places that like kind of gives you that itch? Like what makes you keep going back to these places?
I mean, I think it's changed quite a bit for me. I think when I was younger, a lot of it was the thrill of going someplace you're not supposed to
Mm.
be. And I think especially when I was younger, a lot of it was, and I think this might be a New Jersey thing because we had Weird New Jersey magazine, but there was a culture sort of what's the creepiest, scariest thing that we can do as kids, teenagers. So you go to the many abandoned mental asylums at Dot New
Sure.
Jersey or abandoned houses. So I think that's gonna. But now I think mostly I do it because it's fun to see a couple close friends and kind of just spend the day where you're all like concentrated, focusing on something. Nobody's really
Mm.
looking at their phone, and then you get to see all these beautiful. A lot of times historic, important places. For me, that's what it is now. I just like that peace and quiet you get of
Mm.
exploring.
Yeah, I mean, talk to me a little bit more about that. I often tell people that don't explore that when they ask like, why do you do this? And I kind of talk about like when you go into an abandoned building, the outside world kind of vanishes. It just like fades away. Can you talk about that feeling that you get when you actually go into a building and like you're actually exploring and kind of how it like silences the world for you?
Yeah, I feel that way too. I think a lot of times when I go exploring, well, one thing is, we'll get to a place and the next thing you know, someone will look at their watch and it's been 6 hours, right? And
Hmm.
you're so intently enjoying yourself and focused on what you're seeing that time is passing. But I think, part of it is, right, you've got to be in the moment and concentrating, right? A lot of the places we go are really dangerous and there's all kinds of hazards. So I think that's part of it too, is like, the same thing, the same focus you might get from rock climbing or another sport like that, where you really have to concentrate, right? I think it's no different when you're exploring, like you're thinking about exactly what you're doing kind of at every second, or you should be. I mean, I know none of
Sure.
us are perfect. We also wander off and make mistakes.
Sure, of course. And for me, I've noticed, over the years, the different kinds of places that I've explored, from hospitals to houses and everything in between. And let me know if you agree with this. I feel like a lot of these places have like a soul almost. Like I don't know if it's like the memories of the past kind of trapped within the walls, or like I feel like some of these buildings like speak to me. And I'm curious to know if other people kind of experience something similar.
No, absolutely. I mean, yeah, whether I don't know if I'd call it a soul or like
Sure.
a energy, a vibe, whatever people want to call it. But no, I think that too, and especially I think places that are have been around for a long time and really do have a history. Like for instance, one of my favorite places to go, and I mean I'll say the name because everyone knows this or they can easily look it up, but the
Sure.
Horn Antenna site.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Okay.
I mean, I love that place. It's where, for if people have never heard of it, it's basically two pretty large radio antennas, but it
Hmm.
used to be part of Bell Labs, but it's what they literally used to discover and prove that the Big Bang was real. Um, and I love going there because I think it just has such an interesting feeling about it, right? You're like, wow, this is literally connecting us to the beginning of time in the universe. Like I know what you mean, like that's the soul I get from a place like
Yeah.
that. And I think they're all different.
Yeah. No, definitely. And do you have like a preference of type of place you like to explore? Like like Big Banks is super into houses and mansions and things like that, and then you've got other people that are like strictly into like churches. So like, do you have a preference of the type of building that you like to explore?
Definitely not into houses.
I agree. I'm not fucking going in there, man. Somebody
Yeah,
probably lives in that house.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, and also there's with houses. for me, this again, I know everybody has their own version of what they like. Though for
Oh,
me, houses have a weird kind of voyeurism that makes me uncomfortable, especially when they're
mm,
newer houses. Like
mm,
older homes that have been empty a long time, it's a little different. But I think newer stuff, I don't care for for that
sure.
feeling you get.
Yeah.
Um, Probably my favorite thing to explore now. I don't think it's a type of place more than ones that have any kind of real history to them, like any kind of historical significance. I find fascinating. Like I love to know the backstory of places. Like I've been doing a lot of exploring of some old army camps and places like that. It's
Wow.
pretty cool because you can tie them right back to World War II and even,
Sure.
specific things that happen, specific, military units, stuff like that. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, definitely history is where I'm at these days.
That's cool. Yeah, I love, there's a couple people I've had on the podcast that are super into like the historical aspect of what we do. And there's a guy, his username is After the Final Curtain, and he explores abandoned theaters around the country, and
We
he
have
tries.
exchanged messages,
Oh, okay,
yes.
so you're familiar. So
Yep.
he tries to get a lot of those buildings kind of restored to their former glory, which is really cool. Like I love what he's doing with urban exploring, but also like the restoration side of things. It's very unique, and so yeah, he's obviously super into like that side of history in America, and it's really cool to like follow along journeys like that with people that are really into that stuff. For you, like, I have to ask, where did the username come from? How did you come up with that? And what's the story behind it?
Um, so hysterical panic, it's kind of a long running joke with people that I've known for years because for my day job, what I do to make a living, I work in advertising, and
Mm.
generally in advertising, people tend to call me when they're in a hysterical panic. Like that's kind of one of the things that I specialize in is like fixing
Fixing
big
things.
problems
Yeah.
very quickly.
Yeah.
And so and so I've just kind of used that handle for quite a while for things.
I
Any
love it.
side projects are hysterical panic projects.
Very clever. Very clever. I love the tie in there
Yeah.
with advertising, but also like fixing things. I think it's cool and very very cool username. Speaking of fixing things, or not fixing things, do you have any urban exploration injury stories?
Oh, I have so many. One that's pretty funny is pretty recently, like within the last year, I was down in Philly with a buddy and a couple of our friends, explorers from France who are over visiting, and we were in a church. It's one that I'm sure a lot of people have seen pictures of. It's that blue church in Philly,
Yeah.
and so you've been to that space. So
I have not been to
if you
that
want
space,
to,
but I know of it.
well, the shot that everybody likes to take there is that sort of like ceiling half floor shot. But to get
Mm.
that shot, you have to climb up into a choir loft, and there was just this very rickety ladder that someone had brought in there. So one of our friends was climbing up there, and I had out my little video camera, and I was taking video of him because it was just kind of entertaining and funny because the ladder looked awful from a distance. And but I was walking back to get a better shot, and the floor gave way underneath me,
Oh.
and basically one of my legs fell all the way down, basically like as far as you can go without breaking yourself, and the entire front of my shin was just completely gashed open. But because it was abandoned, I had an infection in my shin that
Oh.
I could not get rid of for 6, 7 weeks. Like it just would not would not clean up. So that was
Oh.
definitely like and it's funny because I have it on video. You have a
Yeah,
video
of
of me
course.
taking and boom, falling through the floor.
Oh
So
my god. So okay, the the reason I ask about the injuries is because like I always want to know about the aftermath. Like did you go to the hospital? Did you talk to a doctor? Like, and if so, like what did you say happened? Like,
so I did talk to a doctor, but in all honesty, it's a doctor who is a friend of mine,
oh,
and
so they're familiar.
it's someone that I know from jujitsu, so he's
Mm.
quite quite comfortable with all kinds of weird injuries. No, and I told him exactly what happened. Yeah, and he was kind of a little bit mystified when it didn't get better in a week. He's like,
Yeah.
it's not getting worse, but it's not getting better, which is funny. But I do think, yeah, and for people out there, right, infections are worth seeing a medical professional over,
Yeah. Oh
especially
yeah.
if you got it in a bando.
Of course, yeah. Especially like you don't want that to turn into gangrene. You don't want to have to get your leg amputated because you were fucking around and fell through a floor. Like, come on, it's
Yeah,
not
because
worth it.
we have no idea like what's growing on like those
Exactly.
wet 80-year-old floors, you know.
Yeah, yeah. You just don't know. And I've heard some crazy stories on this show. One person was talking about his friend getting impaled on a fence. And so they went to a hospital. He had to like lift his friend's body off the fence so he could get his
Oh
leg
my God.
off of it was like one of those spike fences, and he just like slipped and his whole leg went through the whatever. And so they went to
That's
the
awful.
hospital, of course. And I was like, what did your friend say to the doctors? Like, what did he say happened? And he was like, oh, I don't know. I wasn't in there for that part. And I was like, damn it. Like, I want to know. Like, what?
You want to know the details?
Yeah, I need the details. Like, was he like, oh, I was climbing a fence and fell, and then you just impaled myself on a fence? Like, just crazy. It's crazy the things that happen when we're doing this hobby/sport that we
Well,
love.
I saw a really one of the most disturbing things that I'd seen was years ago at one of the hospital complexes in New Jersey that's no longer there. We used to go up there all the time to explore like huge, to a whole bunch of buildings, some 6, 7 stories, kind of almost like a mini Kings Park. And
Mm-hmm.
we were there and, we met some other kids that were riding dirt bikes back there. We talked to them for a bit. They gave us some info. We gave them some. And then a little while later, one of the kids was up on the roof. And I don't know exactly what happened, but he fell off the roof of the
Oh,
hospital. And I don't know, like, I mean, you're right, we can speculate. Well, I have no idea. And he was in serious trouble when we went over there. And what was really scary was this was pre-cell phone days. So we basically had to walk, probably close to a mile to get to
oh,
our car to then drive another, mile or two to a place where we could get a payphone. So yeah, that was
oh.
one thing that was really like has stuck with me over the years. Like that was a scary thing to see.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine. I've heard stories of people falling down elevator shafts, things like that, in these abandoned buildings. I mean, it's dangerous, but did you like did what happened to the kid? Was he
I
did he survive? Do you not know?
yeah, I don't know. Like,
Holy
I
shit!
know when we ran over and his friend ran over as well, like he was conscious, he
Wow.
was, but he was in rough
Oh
shape. And so,
yeah.
yeah, and being younger people with not a lot of civic responsibility at that point,
Sure.
we called the police and the ambulance from a payphone, but didn't go back, didn't say like, that we were up there or anything like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Wow, man. I mean, you can only hope that the kid made it out of that, but I mean, falling off a roof, that's pretty freaking serious. Damn.
yeah,
Whew.
that's a bad one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure that like that stuck with you for you said you still remember it clearly. And speaking of like things like that, like has anything ever made you want to stop exploring?
Um, I don't think anything's ever made me want to stop forever. It's kind of in my nature, but
Hmm.
definitely different things have made me want to take breaks.
Sure.
You know, I think especially at one point, I lived in New York City for a long time and I thought tunnels were great. Like I
Oh,
don't think tunnels are
nope.
so great anymore.
Nope.
And and I have a couple of friends who are, real tunnel people, but yeah,
Y-
like that's one thing where I was like, I think I'm just gonna kind of step back from this for this part of it, and not
Yeah.
really do this anymore. It's a little too much for me.
Yeah. You will not catch me underground. You will not. Nope. I have friends that are like, let's go explore mine. I'm like, you want to die? You want to die, motherfucker? Like, you're asking for bad shit to happen to you if you're trying to go underground, bro. Like, we're not supposed to be down there. Underground is
Yeah,
for dead people, okay?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No mines, no caves.
Nope.
I'm good.
Nope. I did a military bunker that was like buried, well, built underground, like in the side of a hill. And it was where they used to store one of the sites, the missile sites where they used to store the intercontinental ballistic missiles.
Oh
And it's
wow.
just miles and miles of tunnels, pitch black. Obviously, there's no lights. You're underground. There's no power, so like you're just kind of wandering around with your flashlight until your flashlight dies and then you're trapped forever kind of thing. Like that was scary for me. And I went with a buddy of mine, and he wanted to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I was like, I'll let you go deeper. I'm just going to chill here. Like, I don't want to go I know my limits basically. And like, I was like, just come back, like look at your watch, come back in like 15, 20 minutes and just let me know you're alive essentially. Right. And, 30 minutes pass, 45 minutes pass. And I'm sitting there in the darkness with no, like just in silence. Like I could hear my brain, you know what I'm saying? Like I could hear the blood in my brain. It was so quiet. And so I start panicking a little bit and I'm like, oh yeah, where the fuck is this guy? Like he fell, I'm starting to like speculate, like he fell off of something. I'm never going to find him in this maze of a labyrinth of a place. Like what is going on? And then eventually like an hour later, I start hearing like in the distance, like his footsteps. And I'm like, oh, thank God. And by the time he got back, I was like, bro, we got to get out of here. Like the sun is setting. Like we got to somehow drive out of these hills, like with no roads. Like we got to go. But yeah, after that experience, I was like, yeah, I'm good on the underground stuff, man. I'm all set.
Yeah, being in the dark and being able to, hear your own sort of brain moving, that's a little bit terrifying.
It's very isolating and like I, people go into those like isolation rooms or like those quiet rooms just to see how long they can withstand it mentally. And I'm like, I would not last very long in one of those. I've done it in real life. It's crazy. Have you ever gotten permission to explore a place?
Yeah, I have a couple of times before. I think it depends. There's some, I don't know. I mean, this is my own personal thing, but I'm not really somebody who like crowbars open doors or
Agreed.
anything, and whatever. Everybody does their own thing. It's none of my business.
Sure.
But so I think there are some places that the only way in really is to, reach out to the owner. And I think, occasionally that works, especially if you do have, if you give them a reason like, hey, I think this is an important building and it should be photographed before it falls over into the parking lot next door. A lot of times people can be pretty receptive, but I'd say just a handful of times over the years have I done that. But I think it's a good option if you can swing it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I've, gotten permission to explore a couple places as well. And, I agree, some of the owners are actually pretty chill, about letting photographers in. But you never know unless you ask, right? Something I wanted to touch on that I haven't really talked about on the show recently or at all. There's this idea that abandoned places could be repurposed for like homeless people to live in. I would love to know your thoughts on that. Just like in general, like if you think that is like a way to kind of combat the homelessness problem in America, because it is kind of so prevalent.
I mean, I'd be all for that, but it doesn't feel realistic in a monetary sense. Actually, one of my close friends who I explore with, probably the most and have since I was a kid, he's an operating engineer. So he does construction, like infrastructure, all that stuff. And as we go through a lot of these places, he over the years will point things out like, oh, this is completely bad, this is completely wrong, this is crumbling, the foundation is crumbling. And I think the amount of money that it would cost to rehab, some of these buildings, you're better off probably knocking them down and building new construction from scratch if you want to do, housing for people, which I'm all for. But I just think, I'm sure there's exceptions to this, but I mean, I can't imagine like turning Kings Park into housing for any reasonable amount of money.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up is because I recently was on tour with a band and a full orchestra, and we went to LA and performed at the Orpheum Theater, which is 2-3 blocks away from the Cecil Hotel in LA, which is on Skid Row, right? And so most people in the URBEX community know of Cecil, or if you are into true crime, you might know of Cecil because of what happened there, or the many things that happened there, rather. That building has been turned into Section 8 housing, which was kind of a shock to me given its history. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring that discussion up on the show, just outside of like exploring, but like still within the realm, and so I just thought that was kind of interesting when we went over to see it, because someone in the orchestra was super into like true crime and all that stuff and wanted to check it out. So we walked over there, and I outside there's hanging a sign that says Section 8 housing, and there's people going in and out, and I was like, yo, you could not pay me to stay the night there, bro. Like, what? It's crazy.
I think you could look at it differently too, which would be, instead of, you know, people owning all these properties and for whatever reason letting them just completely collapse and dilapidate and fall apart, maybe, there's some type of regulation where if a property is vacant or collapsing after a certain time, like the property owner should have to do something with it, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
prevent it before it turns into a collapsing ruin might be
Right.
nice.
Yeah, like there should still be some sort of responsibility there if you own the property. Like, and I know a lot of these places are like in, legal proceedings. Like, a lot of the big mansion type houses down where I live. I'm in Tennessee, so a lot of the big mansions here are tied up in like litigation as far as like who owns it. It was like in the family, somebody died, and like so they're trying to figure out like who owns the estate now, and so it's like they can't do anything. So it's like it is kind of a difficult thing when it comes to that, but I still think it should. I agree. I think it should be somebody's responsibility to like take care of the situation before it gets worse. For you, like what was your scariest exploration, if you could pick one?
I guess there's different kinds of scary too, right?
True. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's scary, you have a bad feeling.
Yeah.
I think and then there's also scary because the place is dangerous, scary because you might run into unsavory people.
Mm-hmm.
One that's always kind of terrified me, and I think because I can't really explain why, was there was an area we used to explore. At one point, it was a very wealthy person's estate, and then there were a number of other sort of smaller homes, throughout all the like woods. It was a massive, massive piece of property, and pretty much everything back there was abandoned except the one main house. So you have to do your whole song and dance. But we were back there one day. We were exploring, and actually, I don't know what it's like in Tennessee, but here in New Jersey, it's like 97 degrees and 100% humidity today.
Oh
And,
yeah, yeah. Same here. Oh yeah.
so it was a day like that I remember we were exploring. So we go through the woods and we came upon one of these sort of abandoned houses, and, two-story 1920s house. We go inside, and the entire first floor, like the living room, is completely filled with torn up Bible pages, but I mean so many Bible pages that it was like what a hamster would walk on.
Oh,
It
fun.
was like it was like a foot deep. And we're walking
Wow.
around this, it was so weird. And then we're walking around this house, and one of my friends turns to me and he's like, "Hey, I can see my breath." And sure enough, we all like immediately notice that we can literally, it's 97
What?
degrees, and we could all see our breath in this house. And the house was freezing, freezing cold. And no electricity,
Sure.
no air conditioners. Like, I mean, it's an old house that's been empty a really, really long time. And we just all kind of like looked at each other and decided to leave.
Yep.
And that's one that's always really stuck with me because I cannot explain, like, I feel like I'm mostly a pretty rational person, and I
Sure.
cannot explain what would make you see your breath in that situation. That one creeps
Wow.
me out.
Yeah, that's freaky. That is freaky for sure. And it's hard to explain that to people if they haven't experienced something like that. And my creepiest recollection of a building is, well, and it's happened a few times honestly, but the first time was in an asylum that I explored, and it was super dark in there, and we turned a corner, and it was darker than it had been previously. Like it was like the darkest dark that I had ever seen or experienced, and it makes you like feel something's watching you. And in those moments, you definitely have the like, you look at your friends, you both feel the same thing, and you're like, we should probably get the fuck out of here, huh? Like that. I think a lot of us have experienced those kind of moments, and people outside of the URBEX community probably haven't really. And so, yeah, when people are like, I want to go exploring with you, I'm like, are you sure you're ready for this?
Another one that's of a different version of terrifying, the people terrifying,
Oh,
the same the same hospital, same asylum where that kid fell off the roof. We were
Yeah.
there another time, and we used to also go there at night, which I also am not into night exploring anymore. That's another thing I've dropped from my list. But to get to it, you basically had to cross a really large overgrown field. It was pretty big. It's probably like half a mile. It takes you a long way to get there. And we're going through, and you're in tall grass, and we see, close enough that we can tell it is a bunch of people have a bonfire.
Mm.
And around the bonfire, there's about 40 shirtless skinheads.
Oh God.
And I'm a punk. I'm from the punk scene, not the good kind of skinheads, not the ones
Right.
that um, and we're all just, sort of frozen in these like tall weeds, thinking like, well, what should we do? We can't go in there. And this woman comes up to us. She kind of almost appears out of nowhere, and she
Oh.
just puts her hand on my friend's chest and she says, "This isn't for you. You should leave." And we were like, "You don't have to tell us twice." I mean, we were
Woo!
gone.
Yo,
And I
what?
always wonder, like, I talk about this one with some of my friends still. It came up recently in the last couple of weeks, and that was a crazy one because, like, what was going on there?
This isn't for you. Oh my
Yeah.
God. I would shit my pants immediately.
I
I would,
basically did. Yeah, we couldn't have left there more
oh
quickly. Like,
man. Okay, so let me ask you this then. Where do you draw the line on risk?
um, I'm not much of a climber.
Okay.
Like, you're not gonna find me climbing cranes.
Sure.
And I think mostly like I'm pretty comfortable with risk if it's reasonable. And what I
Mm,
mean is like I'll go up janky stairways,
sure.
like I'll walk on catwalks, that kind of stuff. It seems safe. But yeah, I'm definitely like not roofs and also not anything that's going to bring you into contact with like pe excessive numbers of people who might want to hurt you.
Like
Like,
40 people in a field? Yeah, that's
well,
a lot.
like there's that jail here in New Jersey
Oh,
that
yeah.
have you been there?
No, I
It's
haven't done a lot in New Jersey, unfortunately.
don't go. Um, well, no, and the reason is, I mean, that place at this point is literally just filled with, more or less like gangs.
A
And
jail? Wow, shocking.
yeah, and you're not gonna walk out of there with your whatever you bring in with you. Like
Damn.
it's
Okay.
that simple. Yeah, so that's yeah. But stuff like so like I'm not gonna go to places like that. But
Yeah.
generally, I'm comfortable with a little risk.
I can appreciate that. And how do you go about finding your locations? Like, are you like an internet sleuth? Are you by foot type of person? I know you said before the podcast you like to run. Like, what is your preferred method of finding locations?
I mean, I definitely have stumbled on a lot of things. Yeah, just like running, hiking, trail running, all that stuff. But I'm definitely a big internet researcher.
Hmm.
There's an amazing tool that I discovered in the last couple of months. It's called Pass Maps. And basically, it's this, you can use it in your web browser and it lets you take, a modern Google map and then you can match up old historic maps, which is really cool because you can
Whoa.
see where things used to be and you can kind of infer like, hey, I think this is probably a place that's worth going out for a visit. You can kind of tell what things were. So that, yeah, I'm definitely a big map and research person. To me, that's like half the fun is just kind of discovering and finding places.
Pass maps. That's super interesting. I had never heard of that. But that, I mean, that's a great, seems like a great tool to be able to, find that stuff. And I've had a couple of people that do a lot of farmhouses. Like they like to go explore farmhouses. And the way they find those is by looking at old railroad maps because, a lot of the farms were close to the railroad tracks back in the day because that's how they, got their food in and out of the town they were in. And so that tip was also very handy. Like if you're trying to find farmhouses, look at old railroad maps because it just makes sense. So that's interesting. Pass maps. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it's a good one. And people can look at tax records. I mean,
Sure.
if you have that proclivity that you like internet research, yeah,
Right.
there's no shortage of ways you can
Yeah.
find. I'm of the opinion. I don't know why people even really like guard things so crazy anymore. I
Yeah. It's
think
so easy to find stuff.
you can find if people post a picture of it,
Yep.
95% of the time you can track it down
Yeah.
very quickly.
Yeah, exactly. And I know there's I just had Big Banks on the podcast again for like the third time, and he was talking about this guy that is kind of exposing his places based off of like random shit. Like he said that the guy found a location based off of a package of bread that was like from the town, which is crazy. Like that's crazy.
That's insane.
That's crazy. If you're like looking that intricately at his videos, like I gotta figure out where the fuck this place, I had that bread. Where's that bread? Like that's crazy. Like to be that obsessed over like trying to find people's locations, but that's an interesting one for sure.
It's wild because, I think as soon as anyone posts a picture, like unfortunately,
It's
one
done
way or
for.
another, people are over time gonna figure that out. And I mean, there is that sort of small percentage of explorers that I know or have met over the years who never ever once post anything, right?
Right.
They get into some absolutely bonkers places and they might show you photos on their phone, but like nothing ever makes it outside that little sort of circle of people, which is kind of crazy that exists too.
Yeah, those are like they're like the hidden urban explorers, you know? They're not
Yeah.
in it for the views or the likes or the clout. They're just like a Puritan explorer, which I can appreciate that, you know, but I don't know. I like storytelling and sharing, you know, personally. Of course, there's some places I've been that I also haven't shared just because, you know, for that reason, or because the people that I'm with that brought me to that place are like, please don't post this online because like, I don't want people to, you know, whatever, ruin the spot or whatever. And I respect that for sure. But yeah, I mean, everybody, you know, does urban exploring differently. There is no guide. There is no like hand rule book of like, you know, what you are allowed to do, and nobody owns this, you know, so it's kind of just like the Wild West out here, which is kind of what I appreciate about it. You know, you're kind of free to do what you feel is right or wrong rather.
Well, and it's a lot of different things too, I think, right? I mean, there's people who do tunnels, there's people who do cranes, there's people who only use an analog camera, you know, I mean, so that's what's cool about it is you can just kind of make it whatever you want it to be, right? There's not like any rule book. And then whenever you think you're that you're the first person who's been to a place, like, nah, probably graffiti writers have been there first. Probably someone, someone else has been there.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of graffiti, like, what are your thoughts on that? People tagging abandoned places. Like, do you have thoughts about it?
It's tough. Like I, grew up in the graffiti world, and I honestly like my like it in some ways it does bum me out when you go to some beautiful place and there's like a terrible piece of graffiti.
Of
But at the
course.
same time, I think all spots are just transient, right? And
Yeah.
no spot sticks around forever, and no one owns any claim to any place. So it's like if people go in there and write graffiti, like, yeah, bummer for those of us who like to take photos and want a clean shop. But at the same time, it's like, this is basically an illegal enterprise that's happening. And,
Yeah.
and who am I to tell people
Yeah.
they can't spray paint on the walls or whatever,
For sure. No, I'm with you. And I think, sometimes it can, like the murals and stuff that are in some of these places can really add to like the character, of the place.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean,
Some
who
of it's
are
beautiful.
we to say what you're allowed and not allowed to do? I'm not the one.
No, me neither. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
as you wish.
not my problem.
Yeah. Do you prefer to explore alone or with people?
Almost always with people. Like I think I really go out with the same 4 or 5 people, really, and that's it. Once in a while, I'll go out and do something alone, but I think to me, it's not the best idea to explore alone unless it's a place that is going to be like very safe and chill. Because, like I said, like I've fallen through floors. Another
Yeah.
time I fell into a hole. I've had all, and I've had things happen to friends too. So I think it's always good to have at least one other person with you in case something, just for safety reasons.
Yeah.
Plus it's more fun to have somebody to talk to.
Yeah, for sure. And you're not as in your head and freaked out when you're with somebody else. I recently on tour, I had like an hour or two to kill between load in and like sound check or whatever. And a friend that was on the tour was like, hey, I think I saw an abandoned skyscraper like around the corner. I was like, well, I'll be right back. I'm going to go check it out. Should have definitely brought somebody with me because it was 17 flights of stairs in the south. So it was hot and, creepy and you're by yourself. So it's like, if somebody's in this 17-story building, I'm fucked. Like,
Yep.
and it's like, I did tell people where I was going, so at least they knew if I didn't come back within like, an hour or so to come find me, come rescue me. But yeah, I definitely prefer to explore with people as well, just for that reason, for the safety aspect of it. But I know there's some people out there that will just travel by themselves and just do the damn thing and send it. I mean, good for you, but again, I ain't the one.
No, like I've done it, but I'm not gonna make a habit out of it. I think it's kind of like
Yeah.
hiking or anything else. You really should
Sure.
have someone with you.
Sure. So, if you could live in one abandoned place you've explored for an entire week, which place would it be?
Ooh, that's a good question. Where I think I'd go is there's this. Everyone has seen pictures of the blue farmhouse that looks
Oh
like the walls
yeah.
are melting. I
Yeah.
think I'd probably stay there. That house is actually practically it's intact in a lot of ways, but it also has like a very nice sort of cozy vibe to it, despite the
Mm.
like way it comes off in pictures. And it's got a couple of beds, it's got a kitchen, two bathrooms. So practically speaking, it would probably be okay to tough out a week there.
Sure. Yeah. There was a mansion here that was really cool for a while until, the hooligans got into it and broke all the glass on the windows and, did all that stuff. But it was beautiful. It was a beautiful place. The ceilings were gorgeous. The master or primary bed or whatever it's called now, I don't know, cancel culture is a thing, but the primary bedroom was super cool. The bed was like a California king and, just beautiful. But yeah, they destroyed it, and so now I wouldn't stay there now. But yeah, I mean, I love that question because everyone's answer is different, and yeah, that that blue house you're talking about is super cool. Um, Knowing what you know about urban exploring and kind of being stealthy and quiet, and kind of keeping to yourself, how long do you think you would survive the apocalypse?
I guess it would depend on the specific type of apocalypse, but I actually think I'd do all right, actually. I know how to use tools. I know how to hike and camp and build fires and all
Mm.
that kind of survival stuff. So I think I'd probably do okay. I think where I'd lose is I'm not a big firearms person. I do
Oh
train
yeah,
jujitsu, so maybe I get a plus for that. But I think
sure.
I think I'd do okay for a while. But then I'd probably be too nice to someone, and they'd hit me in the back of the head with like a,
Yeah.
a weight and take
Yeah.
everything I have.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's so true, dude. Like, you try to be nice, but in the apocalypse, there is no niceness.
No.
Someone's going to turn on you at some point. Absolutely. So I have a question. So, one of the sections of this podcast, I started asking my guests to ask the next guest a question. It's just been kind of fun to see other people's perspectives. So, TW Visions, his question is, what was your craziest escape?
Oh man. Okay. I've got an insane. This is an insane story. So
Let's go.
uh, so me and two other explorers. Actually, they've told this story. I know they'll be fun. So Max Bond and John Goodman, two of my good friends. The three of us were exploring a notorious power plant in Philadelphia, which I'm sure every single person knows. Um, and we got into the place clean early in the morning. We were there pretty much all day, 6, 7 hours, loving it. Amazing place. We're having the best time of our lives. We go to leave, and the way that we came in was sort of through like a gate through a door, but we see that now that we go to leave, the security guard is in his truck and he's parked right in front of this gate. And so there's no way that we can get out. And the security guard there has a notorious reputation,
Oh.
which will come into play in the story. He's not your average rent a cop. So we say, well, okay, well, there's got to be another way out. This place is, I don't know how big that place is, but it's probably the biggest bando that I've ever been. It's
Mm.
massive. We wander around for another hour, and finally, in one of the like sub levels of the place, we find there's a series of garage doors, and somebody has cut basically a doggy door size thing through there are one, two, three garage doors because they're running. They had like a hose that they were using to pump out part of it that had flooded.
Mm.
So we're like, okay, we'll go out here. My one buddy, Max, goes out, and then basically Justin and I are there, and Justin is a big dude, tall, I'm tall, and he's way taller than me. Can't fit through the doggy door. So Justin and I decide to stay in there, and the plan is Max is going to escape, and he's going to go get his truck, and then he's going to drive down the driveway of this place, and like a Scooby-Doo episode, lure away the security guard to the back of the building. And and when he does this, Justin and I are going to run out the way we came in, out to the street, and he'll just be like, "Oh, sorry, I made a wrong turn," and everything will be good. Like, great plan.
Yeah.
So we go back up to the area where we can see the security guard and where we're going to run out. A little while later, 20 minutes later, Max comes cruising in. He turns the wrong way and down, like wrong driveway. We're like yelling into the phone, well, quietly yelling so the guard can't hear us. So he comes back around, he drives to the back. Security guard follows him. The plan is working. He goes around to the back of the building. Justin and I, we've got our gear, our tripods. We go sprinting out of the building and through the driveway. And we're like in open space, but we're pretty close to the street.
Yeah.
We're about 5 feet from the street, and all of a sudden the security guard comes ripping around in the car and he sees us. So we just keep walking. The security guard pulls out of the sight and starts following us. He has a woman in the car who's hanging out of the window, waving her cell phone, filming us. And we're both just like, we just keep walking and walking, and he's screaming crazy stuff. He has a gun on his lap. Like, this
Damn.
is not a good situation. Yeah, this is not a good situation. He's completely gone insane. We finally walk about a mile just not looking at him, and he finally turns around and leaves. We walk all the way back. Max scoops us up on the road. We go to get John Goodman's car, which is parked, on the side in a different parking lot. We get there, and his tires are slashed. So basically, we have to drive his car a safe distance away, and we call AAA to change the tire because we don't have the right stuff to do it. It was a whole thing. That was probably like one of my craziest escapes. Like, it was insane, and it went on for an hour. Like, that thing from front to back was like 1 to 2 hours long.
Oh my God. Slashed the tires.
Yeah. I mean, he just was
What a
completely
maniac.
unhinged. Yeah, he's done some other crazy stuff. That place is no joke as far as like
man.
if you get caught there.
Wow, that's wild. And then one other question from another guy, Earth's Unknown Places. His question is, what is the weirdest thing you've seen while exploring?
I don't know if it's the weirdest, but it's the first one that comes to mind. Is I was exploring an abandoned chemical factory, and I was with a friend of mine who is not an explorer, but is just a cool, interesting guy, and just wanted to come out and check this out. And it's quiet. We're walking around. I've been to this place before. Like, I actually know the layout of it pretty well. And we go and we turn a corner. Like, we hear dripping water, and we turn a corner. And there's a completely naked man who has a homemade shower, basically a garbage bag filled with water, tied on rope, hanging from a pipe on the ceiling with holes poked in it. And he has like a bar of soap, and he's basically having a homemade shower in this abandoned chemical factory. It's just like, oh, sorry, man, didn't mean to bother you.
Jesus. And he's just like continues to shower. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, did not miss a
Didn't
beat.
bat an
Was
eye,
just-
yeah.
Like, it wasn't the first time he's been interrupted using his homemade shower.
Oh my God. He's just comfortable as fuck at this point. Amazing.
Yeah, I mean, clearly he's home.
Yes, exactly. You walked into the man's house. So do you have a question that you would like me to ask the next guest?
What is something you've touched while exploring that you really regret touching?
Okay, you have to answer the question.
Probably one. I put my hand down in this one in the basement of this paper mill because to take a shot, and what I didn't realize was the entire floor there had like an inch and a half of some kind of toxic chemical, and then it was really dark down there. And then we noticed that the entire basement was filled with 55-gallon drums with like skull and crossbones and like hazmat symbols on them. So I have
Oh.
no idea what I touched. I also I looked up the place later on, and it is a legitimate super fun site, right? So I don't know what was there, but luckily I'm still here. I still have
You
all
haven't
my
turned into
fingers
a
on that
super
hand.
super villain yet.
Not yet.
I don't know if I've touched it. Well, I mean, I'm sure I've touched some like gross things, just like in general. It's pretty gross at a lot of these places. But I don't know if there's anything like super memorable that I was like, what the fuck did I just stick my hand in? But I was, okay, so that abandoned military bunker I was talking about earlier, the water in there was full of like some sort of like chemical. I don't know what it was, like maybe like rocket fuel or something. I don't know, but like when you see oil in water, it like
Hmm.
has like the rainbow looking effect, and that
Yep.
was pretty gross. And it was like rust colored water because obviously all the metal was just like sat in feet of water for 50 years, since the Cold War. So it was pretty disgusting in there. And when my friend was like, oh, let's keep going farther in, we had to traverse across this like really narrow, like 1 foot at a time beam. And that's when I was like, bro, if I fall in this water, I'm going to lose my shit. Like I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay right here. You go.
Was it
And
deep
yeah.
water too? Like you would
Yeah,
go
I
all
mean
the way
like
under?
you couldn't see the bottom of it. It's pretty fucking disgusting. Yeah, it
That's
was so
tough.
gross. And just like rust orange. Like nasty. Nasty. Okay, so last major question. What is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started exploring?
That it's totally okay to go to a place and strike out and decide not to do it. If you go someplace and your gut is telling you like today's not the day or something seems off, like don't let your ego get the best of you. Like come back another day. I think
Mm.
that's the one thing that I would tell myself because every time that I've ignored that feeling, I've come to get payback. That's absolutely it.
Wow, yeah. I mean, it's true. Like there will always be another day, unless the place is getting demolished tomorrow. But
Sure. Yeah.
in general, there will always be another day to go back to that place, even if you've traveled hundreds of miles, thousands of miles. Like, just extend your trip, come back tomorrow. It's gonna be okay. And you're not gonna get into every spot. Like I met up with a group of like 4 or 5 people in southern Alabama on a Sunday, which is, by the way, if you're in the Bible Belt, the worst day to explore because everyone's at home after church. Like, you can't get away with anything. Everybody's like gossiping on a Sunday on the porch. You're just not going to get. We went into this one house that was kind of falling apart, and we're like going through like the woods or bushes, trees, whatever, trying to get to the actual house. And there's like leaves all over the ground. So we're not very quiet. You can clearly hear the leaves crunching under our feet. And all of a sudden we hear like from across the way, y'all better get out of that house. Oh, fuck. We were like, oh, shit, we're going to get shot. We got to go. Southern Alabama, not good to explore on a Sunday, we learned.
No, or even in April we were at Kings Park and
Yeah.
we'd been there the whole day and we were just gonna like okay we're just gonna hit the big building 94 at the end, and when we were
Mm.
gonna go, there were three of us and my one friend was like, I'm not going in there, I don't think it's good, I don't feel right, I'm just gonna like go sit on a bench and like look at my phone for a while. Like no, come on. He's like no, no, I don't think I don't, I'm not feeling it today.
Yeah.
We go in there and we're in there for maybe 45 minutes an hour. We're walking around and all of a sudden an entire mob of people, I'm not exaggerating, 20 people. There are teenagers in flip-flops. There are literal old men with like canes. And this person looks at me like, are you part of the such and such camera club? And I was like,
What?
no. I was like, no. I was like, what are you doing? They're like, oh, our camera club is doing something here. And I look at my friend and we're like, all right, we got to get out of here. We go and we leave the building. And as we're leaving, we got in, like I lifted up the fence and we
Yeah.
rolled under. I lift up the fence, my buddy rolls under, and I'm behind the fence still, and a ranger appears.
Oh,
And
fuck.
he's like, look, man, he's like, you might as well just come out this hole in the fence back here right now. And I'm like, all right, I'm just busted, you know? So I
Yeah.
walk out the hole in the fence and I'm like, he's like, I know, you know, you're not supposed to be in there. I'm like, I know. And but he's like, I don't really care. He's like, the problem was somebody called the police. They just saw these people cutting a hole in the fence with wire
Oh
cutters.
God. Come
And that
on.
was the whole, and so he's like, it's cool, man. Like you can just split. And he literally had a pickup truck and a piece of fence, and he was closing those people in. He was closing up the hole in the fence that they just cut. So there was basically an entire camera club, like 20 people who thought this was like great adventure in there, like caught.
Just trapped with their flip
Just,
flops on.
yep.
Good luck climbing a fence in flip flops, you asshole.
Yep, walking through like rusty old beds and
Oh.
stuff, and I was just like, this is insane. But I know that was the time where my buddy like called it, and we ignored it, and we're lucky nothing too
Yeah.
bad happened, but it
Yeah.
totally could have, you know.
Wow. Jesus. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on No Tracers and for sharing your stories here. It was
Thanks
really
for
cool.
asking me.
Yeah, man, it was really cool chatting with you. If people want to keep following your journey, where can they find your photography online, or if you do video stuff as well? Like, let people know where they can follow your journey online.
The only thing I have is Instagram. I'm hysterical.panic. So you can find me there where I try to post one picture a day. That's my personal project, one a day.
So, guys, that was my episode with Mike, aka Hysterical Panic. Give him a follow on Instagram. That is where he primarily posts, as he said, right there at the end of the episode. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. If you would like to come on the No Tracers podcast, you can hit me up on my Instagram at no.tracers, or you can shoot me an email at contact@notracers.com. If I don't reply, it's because my email has been weird. I'm able to send emails, but I'm for some reason not getting emails right now. I've checked everything on the back end and it seems to be fine, so I don't know what's going on, but hopefully I can get that sorted out soon. But if I don't reply to you, I apologize. Please hit me up on Instagram. But yeah, thanks for listening to another episode of the No Tracers podcast. Stay strong, keep enduring, go out, go explore something, and remember, leave no trace.